Hey, everybody, this is Mark Bowers with Hampton Roads ISPI, standing in behalf of Scott Weersing. And I would like to welcome everybody here and with us now, and everybody who's going to join us in a little bit. And those of you who may join us via our YouTube channel, Matt Kurtin is joining us today to talk a little about, do your learning technologies work together or against you? Since we only have a few people in the room, let's go around and do a couple quick introductions. I think we all know each other, but Matt doesn't necessarily know all of us. So as I said, I'm Mark Bowers. I'm with the Hampton Roads chapter of ISPI. I do a bunch of volunteer work at ISPI Global, mostly behind the scenes, nerdy technology stuff. And I am retired, which simply means I'm working twice as hard, doing things that I like a little bit better for no money whatsoever. So that's where I am today. Erwin, if you'd be so kind.
Hi, I'm Erwin Jankovic. I am retired from Boeing in the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and I used to be a university professor. And my focus has always been on organizational improvement. So um, I've done a lot of different things in that area, and I'm based in Los Angeles.
Very good. Thanks, Erwin. Vance, you're up.
Right. Well, good evening. I guess I'll get it right this time. I'm currently working at Norfolk Naval Shipyard in Portsmouth, Virginia, as a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, and I do performance improvement, instructional systems design, and other performance improvement disciplines here. Pleasure to be with you. Oh, I'm also a CPT. Yeah.
All of this in the CPT too. All right, thanks, Vance. Good to hear from you again. Madam President, Marcia.
Good evening, everyone. I am Marcia Stewart, and I am also a member of the HRISPI chapter. I am the current president. I work at Newport News Shipbuilding. I manage the log room there. I do consulting to where I lead teams. I assess change management and all the things associated with it. Learning is my passion, so I'm always interested in, am I getting in the way of learning? So thank you, and I am looking forward to this presentation.
All right, lovely. With that, the last person for introductions in the room is Matt, so please introduce yourself, take it away, and we will sit here and absorb and ask you questions in the chat or raise our hands or just barge right in, depending how the mood hits us. So, all yours.
Sounds great. So I'm Matt Kurtin, the Senior Director of Technology and Visual Design at Innovative Learning Group. I work here with Lisa Tonnegus, who's the past president of ISPI International that some of you may know. I'm expecting that she may also join tonight, so I hope she'll pop in soon. And because we have, at least right now, such a small group, as Mark said, let's keep it informal. Feel to jump in with questions at any time. I want to address any questions that you have. So the premise here is, has your organization or one of the ones that you consult for struggled with getting the best out of learning technology? In my experience, I've seen this issue time and time again with all kinds of companies and all kinds of industries. It just really isn't that easy to get the learning technology right. And once we do get it right, we have to watch out because there's so much ongoing change that we're going to have maintenance to maintain it, even if we do get it right. So this is my depiction of how it may feel when the technology is not working, you versus the learning technology. And that's certainly not what we want. Looks like a couple people, maybe one person did just join. Again, I'm Matt Kurtin, Senior Director of Technology and Visual Design at Innovative Learning Group. And our purpose for our organization is to create custom training and tools to help employees do their jobs more effectively, which is right aligned with ISPI. So what do we need to know in order to get to better usage of learning technology? I'm going to focus primarily on three things today. The first thing is that it's important that we connect the learning technology strategy to the right points in the overall learning strategy. You can't do a learning technology strategy in isolation. It really has to be grounded to that overall learning strategy. The next thing is we need to understand what the components of the learning technology strategy are. And then we need the details of the process for how to create the strategy. So that's where I intend to focus my path today. But again, if you have questions of any type, we'll take it as it goes. So let's start with how we connect to the overall learning strategy. So when we're conducting a learning strategy, we start with the vision on the one end closest to us in the picture. And what we want to achieve is to arrive at a plan for implementing that strategy. So we want to get from the vision to the implementation plan, or from the what it is we want to do to how we're going to get it done. If we talk about what's in the vision for an overall learning strategy, it's going to describe what happens within the organization now and in the future. So it's the current state and where we want to go. And if you're thinking about where are we talking about in the future, you could set that when you're working on your learning strategy to be any time frame. But most often when we're doing learning strategies, and I'm focused on the learning technology strategy component of it, we're talking something like 3 to 5 years out. What do we want learning to be like at this organization? Then that implementation plan should really detail specifically the steps and the timeline and the responsibilities for making that vision come to life. Now, you see there's a lot of path points in between. You're not going to be able to jump straight from the vision to the implementation plan. We need to go through these steps. And we have them written out as steps in this order because one step informs the next. The vision sets what it is you're going to do, the parameters for how you go about the audience and the macro learning needs. And that drives the governance, and that drives the delivery methods, and so on down the path. So the first thing I want to do is just have you look at these steps, because it may not be technology that you see where there's the most struggles. But again, whether it's your organization or an organization you consult for, where do you most often see struggles? And let me know, is it technology or something else? I guess, Mark, I'll start with you.
This is overall, this is super interesting to me. Even though I'm not really, or not by any stretch of the imagination, instructional designer, I still work a big system here for ISPI. So as you went through those first 3 steps, I was thinking about this beast I have created over time and continuing. It's like the following the strategy development plan, and it's like that alone is something that I would be happy to say that somebody other than me knows, and where that really speaks to is in this chart from vision to implementation to me is it actually kind of, I'm skipping past governance and delivery methods and like leaping right into technology. Sometimes this is what we can afford, so requirements to follow. But for me, it's those critical steps, just like it should be anywhere, right? Those first few steps is like if I don't nail those, no one will be able to take this mantle from me. The ISPI will not be able to get all the potential value, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's been a number of times where an organization has reached out and said, please help us with our technology. And when we ask questions about what delivery methods do you need to support, how do you get direction from the larger organization, who is your audience? Sometimes they don't know the answer to the majority of those questions. And then I say, we got to back up a little bit. We're not going to be able to help you get the technology right if we don't know what we're aiming for. Is there anybody else who'd like to weigh in? Are there parts that you see are most difficult or cause the most problems?
When I worked at the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, we were a very complex organization covering 5,200 miles, had dams, rivers, aqueducts, and all that sort of stuff. And our technical staff, the people that kind of manage the water, they had to have as many as 48 certifications to be able to do the work they did. And none of the systems we were able to find, even though that we were told they could handle this, the technology could not handle the renewals and the maintaining certifications well. And so that was always a struggle for us.
Thank you, Erwin. Marcia, it sounded like you were going to say something.
Yes. So what I agree with what Mark said, that you First, you need to figure out if you're even able to have that software connected to your system. And I think that that's the first step a lot of people do fail to do. So you purchase it and it sit on the shelf because it cannot connect to the inner workings or the intranet of the organization. The other piece is that we get technology that we do not vet and determine, is it the right technology for what we're doing or trying to do? I find that we get technology because, oh, it's the latest and greatest, but it's the latest and greatest for that industry. It's not necessarily the latest and greatest for the industry that I'm in. So I
Excellent.
sometimes think we get the wrong technology.
Yeah, the way I like to think about it is like this. If you're trying to think about what technology do we need, we should focus on these items on the left side because they should be saying what it is we're trying to accomplish. And then we should be getting technology if it helps fulfill those things. If it matches up to a delivery method we've already identified that we want or an audience and macro learning need that we need to serve. Just to what you were saying, not just technology for technology's sake. And then if we want to think about how are we going to implement that technology, that's where we go to the other side because by then from the left side, we know what technology we need. But on the right-hand side, we say, all right, now if we decided we're going to do this particular technology, e-learning or virtual instructor-led or whatever it is, how are we going to go about doing it? How are we going to procure it? How are we going to evaluate if it's working right? And what structure do we need within our organization to make it work? Let's see. So if we then focus in on the main topic for today, the technology part, what we focus in there for the learning strategy is really kind of the gap analysis, the current state and the desired state for the tools and the platforms that you would use to develop, distribute, and track learning. And within that platforms part, we're going to lump in some of the underlying infrastructure that supports all technology and therefore supports learning technology as well. Okay. So I have a scenario here for us all to think about what might go wrong if you don't have a learning strategy. So in this scenario, we've got some salespeople. The team feels like they need mobile training right now because they want to be on their phone, and they don't go through the strategic process to figure it out. So I'm going to put up the scenario and give you a second to read it and have you think what might go wrong. Is it large enough that you can read it?
So I'm driving. I won't be able to read it, but I'll listen to the feedback.
For those of us who are not driving and learning, it's perfectly legible.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, let me know when you've got some ideas. I know Marcia won't be able to see it, so if somebody new wants to jump in, good. Otherwise, anybody's welcome.
Well, I'll throw something in.
Oh.
Now, go ahead, Vance. I always, go ahead, Vance.
So we have a situation where we have multiple platforms that provide access to training, and we have found that some of those platforms are being set to different levels of sensitivity and different levels of requirements. So some are mandatory, some are situational, and some are by choice. And they're the exact same programs, but the LMS doesn't talk to each other. So some of the voluntary attendees don't get credit for the mandatory system. So that's a problem.
Yeah, so that's actually fairly similar to the problem here. What were you going to say, Mark? Go ahead.
Well, I feel like I'm totally channeling Scott here. Um, but I'd be right with him when he chokes on the very first statement, mobile training needed right now. Just that alone. And I know we said we're going to focus on the technology box and not necessarily the preliminary steps. I'm just having a hard time getting past the fact that we have a training emergency.
Yeah.
So I believe every subsequent decision is pretty suspect.
So in this case, what happened, and I kind of recap it, Marcia, just so you understand what was going on, is that, uh, as Mark said, it's an emergency. We got to have the training right now. We can't wait to really figure this out. We're going to go and get this micro learning platform so that we can push out training to people and they can take it on their phones. But they didn't stop to think about the integration with other systems, which aligns with what Vance was saying. And so what they ended up with is no centralized reporting. And so if people are getting that pushed to them, it doesn't get tracked to the LMS. If they want to figure out who did what, now they have to go to a second place to get reports, right? And if it were only one other place, maybe not so bad of a problem. But then you imagine the next group decides they need something right now that doesn't integrate, and the next group. And before you know it, you want to get reports on what people did. You got 18 places to go look who did what. So very well, they might have spent a little bit more time looking. If they had a standardized process for selection of new tools, they might have found we could meet all the other needs we had, but we could have it integrated in with the rest of our system so it reports in the right place.
Well,
All right, I'm jumping
the other
to. Oh,
technology
go ahead.
issue, the other technology issue with mobile products like that, cell phones and what have you, is the kind of learning need they have using a cell phone is often an immediate problem they're trying to solve, and the learning content that's available may not address that particular problem that they're trying to solve, and that's often the case, I find.
Absolutely, you could have a problem where the type of content that you could push to that phone might be fine for some general awareness stuff, but it's not going to help them practice a skill that they might need to know, and it's just not the right way because they can't get feedback they know if they're trying to practice a skill. Okay, so I'm moving to a topic about how you go about conducting the analysis, that gap analysis for the technology section, which fits into the overall. So best way to conduct that learning technology analysis, much like the overall path from the vision to the implementation plan, we're talking about for now learning technology specifically, the current state and the desired future state. And then what are the gaps between the current state and the desired state? So it could be that the technology you have is either insufficient or inefficient. So an example of insufficient would be you have a need to provide some learning and you can't provide it because you're missing a tool that you need to create or deliver it. You don't have the right authoring tool. You don't have the right learning management system. An example of inefficient would be having multiple tools that could do the same thing, but using a whole bunch of different ones for no rhyme or reason. So 5 different tools that all produce e-learning that's similar in the results. If you do that type of thing, you could incur extra licensing costs. You could require more skill training to use the tools, have to develop new standards. So we have problems in both ways. Not enough tools or platforms to do the right job, and too many if there's no reason for it. And then once we identify the gaps, then we're going to propose recommendations to fill those gaps. So if you think about it, any kind of a gap analysis would have these steps. So what makes it specific for learning technology? And what it does is if we do these steps for each of the learning technology strategy sections. So just like the overall learning strategy had sections within it, we're going to also subdivide the learning technology strategy into different sections so that we can focus on each one. So these are the relevant sections. First is that infrastructure architecture. This is really the foundation that supports the learning tools and platforms. And you would have this infrastructure in an organization even if you had no learning parts. It's going to be things like the networks and the servers. I'll go into it a little bit more, but the underlying IT technology. Then you're going to have the learning tools and platforms that play a role in the development of the training, the distribution of the training to the learners, and the tracking of the learner progress. So these are the categories I use to divide up tools that are similar, tools and platforms that are similar to each other. So if that infrastructure architecture is the foundation and it's really low level and it really is in the information technology range, why does it matter to us as the architects of learning? We might think, okay, IT's got that handled, doesn't matter. But it is going to matter to us because if we don't have a kind of an understanding of what the limits are and the parameters are, we may end up developing solutions that don't work for our learners. Now, I will say often this infrastructure architecture is kind of set and we just have to make use of it. We don't often get to go in and say, I wish you had this network architecture instead, or I must have this much bandwidth. But if we know that the bandwidth limit is a certain thing, then we can design training that matches it. But another thing that we can sometimes do is we can request, we can get information about a change that's upcoming, like IT is planning to go to a faster bandwidth, or IT is planning to put in a new security system, and you might be able to piggyback on top of that or be better prepared when it happens. So for those types of things, it's really good to have that connection to what's going on in IT. And when you're putting together this strategy, you're going to want to get the current state now and then kind of maintain over time. So it's things like web servers and databases, operating systems, browsers, laptops, phones. It could be also tablets. It's really all the things, all the technology bits that have to be in place for you to deliver learning out to as a solution.
So can I say one thing to that?
Yes.
So one thing that I like about what you're saying, it also makes those aware that just like we had Windows 10 and 11, so we could have decided that the technology we wanted was great for Windows 10, but then once Windows 11 was released, it would no longer be able to operate because it couldn't, whatever the parameters were, it would not be able to run. So I think that it would be, do you think that is an example of one of the reasons why you may want to keep a close relationship with IT?
That is a good example. Another example that would be similar is at the time when Flash had been in use for a while and it was about to go away. Having information that Flash is going away before people just find that their courses don't work anymore, right? And the more lead time you have to adapt to that type of thing. And now, current time, it's going to be what is the IT team doing about rules and allowances for what you can do with AI, right? Keeping tabs with that is going to help you be able to make the best use of it for learning solutions. All right, so if that was the underlying infrastructure, the next part in our path is going to be the development tools that could be used to create the learning solutions. So these vary widely in cost and features, as well as the skill to use them. And again, I'm going to group these into categories of tools that are similar. So there's your traditional e-learning tools. There's content management systems, which would gather together different assets that you might use to put into e-learning or into PowerPoint slides or into whatever else you're developing, a facilitator guide. There's media development tools, and these would be the things that you use to edit audio or video or graphics, that type of thing. And then there's tools that are specifically for more advanced things like games and simulations or augmented reality and virtual reality that, again, are typically a higher level of complexity, but sometimes might be warranted depending on what the learning need is. And then what about AI? So some people might say, well, isn't AI a development tool? But I would say, well, artificial intelligence really is going to enhance most of these kinds of tools. And if you say, if someone says, oh, we should be using AI, in a way, that's almost just like a while back saying, hey, everybody, you got to use computers. You got to be more specific for what, right? You can't just say you got to use AI. I mean, you can, and to encourage people, you could say you got to use AI. Let's go doing it. But to do anything with it, you got to get more specific. And then once we have had the infrastructure and we've developed the learning, the next thing on our path is the distribution platforms. And that's how do we get the learning to the learners? So this might happen for something that we developed in the prior path, you internally, or you might have had someone custom develop it to you for you outsourced, or it might be you purchased some off-the-shelf learning. And any of these would need to be delivered in some fashion. Could be through your own distribution platform. If it's an off-the-shelf, it might be by that off-the-shelf vendor providing a distribution platform that's separate. But the distribution platforms come in a few forms. So there's learning management systems, learning experience platforms, portals, and video distribution. And there's a lot more detail in the first of those three, so I'm going to cover them in more detail separately. But video distribution platforms have a few different features, but one of the most important things about the video distribution platform, you could think something like Vimeo, is that they can automatically adjust the compression rates of the video. So depending on the learner's bandwidth, if they have a faster or a slower connection, if they have a faster connection, they'll get a higher quality. If they have a lower connection speed, they'll automatically get a lesser quality so that there's no stuttering and the video arrives on time to play back. That's one of the main things of video distribution platforms. They also can do things like add a social component to it where people can put comments and ratings and track who viewed what. But that one's kind of a special case, and the other three more general. And then we're going to have a little bit of overlap between distribution platforms and tracking platforms because some tools play in both spaces. So you're going to find that the LMS and the LXP, Learning Management System and Learning Experience Platform, do both distribution and tracking. There's also the XAPI Learning Record Store, which is just tracking, not distribution. And then some reporting and analytics tool that help us make sense after we have the data. So once we've developed and distributed our learning or performance support, right, we want to keep up with multiple things. I'm sure from the evaluation side, we want to know how many learners use the solutions that we provided. Did they gain knowledge from it? Can they apply the skills on a job? Was there a positive impact? All those Kirkpatrick kind of evaluation stuff. But we also want to know, are there dashboards or reports that once this stuff gets collected, that managers can see what's happening, that people themselves know what's happening. And that's where these reporting and analytics tools might come in, is to have a nice way to look at it. I can't tell you how many companies have a learning management system where everybody there hates the reporting that they have available. They can't customize the reports the way they want. All right, so this is kind of the end of a topic. Are there any questions on this section before I jump to the next thing? All right. So let's talk about the process. We have now all the relevant sections that we need to include in our strategy, but how do you actually go about doing the strategy? So we have a way that we do this. Of course, we can adapt it according to the client needs, but a standard way that we do it. So the first thing we're going to do is review any documentation that's available and then develop some thought starter questions. The questions are going to relate to the infrastructure architecture and the tools and platforms that we talked about: development, distribution, and tracking of learning. They might also include technology equipment. If you have classroom facilities in your organization, sometimes that gets included, sometimes it doesn't. Maybe less now that everybody's attending remotely. And then what we're going to do is conduct interviews with learning leaders and IT leaders. So we want to talk to learning leaders for every business unit because we want to be able to figure out what are their technology needs and how does it differ based on who's in their audience and what their macro learning needs are. But then we're going to try to include IT leaders responsible for overall IT. So we get that really big picture look. Where is IT going for the organization? And then also some IT leaders who are responsible specifically for learning technology, maybe those that manage the learning management system. And then what we're going to do, based on those interviews, we're going to get together a core team. And but probably by the time you got this far, you had the roots of the core team or who's going to be in the core team in mind. But sometimes going through those interviews will identify somebody else or some other folks to add to the core team who are going to go through and help verify the current state and the desired state. And as far as the size of the core team goes, you want to have enough there that you represent all the views that you need to represent, but they don't have to be able to answer every question you might ask directly. They could send some people off to go get information and bring it back to them so that the core team meeting doesn't get too big. Oftentimes we see there might be something like 6 to 8 people in a core team working on the learning strategy. And then sometimes if there's information that's not known about the current state, it's easiest to use surveys to get it because you can sweep out a wide net to get a lot of information and distill it down and then focus on where it's not clear from the survey. But the future state is a different matter. You could use a survey, but you're going to often need to really have discussions to figure out the future state because the way I look at it, the current state is more like facts and the future state is more like wishes where you got to figure out more how it really fits in. And a really important thing about this work on the future state is that the future state really it's not coming out of thin air, right? The future state, it should be coming out of the preceding sections, the vision, the audience, the macro learning needs, the government, the delivery methods. So if people come up with great new ideas to do here for learning, but they weren't in the prior sections, it doesn't mean you shouldn't go do it. It means it's probably out of the scope of this learning technology strategy, or you need to go back and say, oh, wait, maybe something got missed in those. But brand new crazy ideas here about how to use technology that aren't connected to those other things that aren't aligned with the strategy. Typically what we would do is we would have maybe 3 or 4 90-minute sessions on validating current state, documenting desired future state, and looking for the gaps. And really the gaps and proposing recommendations really comes partly as you're developing the current and future state, but really when the current and future state are all the way done is when you can fully identify the gaps, propose the recommendations, and then develop an implementation plan for the technology part.
How does gathering input from the users of the learning and the managers of the users?
So you definitely don't want to leave that out. And so I think you're going to probably try to do that mostly through the learning leaders of each business unit, but you may task them with not what's your opinion about what we should do, but go gather from your business unit, gather from your teams, make sure you understand what the needs are. If they're guessing, if they don't have a good handle on it, we will have a faulty input. That's a great point. All right. So that's our process for going through to figure out what we should do in terms of filling gaps between what it is we have and what it is we need. So this is a question that we get from a lot of our clients, oftentimes not in conjunction with any strategy, but just out of the blue. Hey, we heard there's such a thing as a learning experience platform or a learning record store. Do we need one of those in addition to our learning management system? So what we need to do in order to answer that question is first we would say, well, we need to understand all these other things about the strategy. But the other thing that we can do is help them answer it for themselves by explaining what do each of these provide you? What are the features of each of these types of systems and comparing and contrasting to look for overlap and unique features. And I've added a new term on this slide, which I sometimes do and sometimes don't, because we talked about the distribution and tracking, but I'm also going to talk about learning discovery while we're in this little area of the topic. And that is because distribution out to people where they could find it in a catalog is different than making it easy for them to search for it themselves because they'd like to learn something. So surfacing things so that you could find it is one of the features we're going to see is going to come in here. So we'll start with the learning management system first. So historically and typically, the most important focus of the learning management system is to make sure that people are in compliance with the things that they have to take. It's a centralized system usually. It can be a little decentralized, but generally centralized. And it focuses often on required learning. Oftentimes, the traditional learning management systems are a part of a larger suite where they come with things like performance management and talent management and other things provided by the same vendor or can be integrated between different systems. But it's more likely to be part of a larger suite than some of the other systems. If we look at what's different about a learning experience platform, it does focus more on this discovery part. How can a learner find something that they're interested in learning? Or how can we create a learning journey for someone so that they can go on a path if they're interested in learning about leadership, or if they're interested in learning about selling or something like that? Can they find that path and go learn it without waiting for somebody to assign it to them? So it's a more decentralized system, often for the recommended learning instead of the required, but you can have required parts to it. It typically has a smaller feature set than a learning management system overall. Learning management system may have all kinds of other features built in order to make it work as a learning management system, where the learning experience platform is fairly committed to helping you find learning, and sometimes with authoring tools built into it to develop those paths. Typically, learning experience platform is more user-friendly, easier to navigate. I'm sure the learning management systems are trying to catch up on that. Learning experience platform is likely to have a social component where when people finish stuff, they give it a star rating and write recommendations for other people to take it. It also will have a kind of a matching system to say, hey, Joe, and your department took this, you might want to take it too, almost as if it was recommending the next movie for you if you were using Netflix. And then because of the way that these systems got started in development, you may also find that the learning experience platform bundles off-the-shelf content. So one well-known learning experience platform is Percipio from Skillsoft, and they kind of made the system in such a way to make it easy to work through and push out new training, recommend new training to you so that you'll take more of their off-the-shelf content. So you'll find quite a few learning experience platforms that are bundled with off-the-shelf content as an option. There are also learning experience platforms that are just learning experience platforms, and that's not their focus to give you that type of content. Then there's the XAPI Learning Record Store, and its focus is on tracking. And in fact, it doesn't have an interface at all for you to find training. There is no catalog. There is no searching. There's just not a user interface from the learner. There's a user interface for people coming back to look at reports. But you can launch from anywhere. So you could be on a website and you start getting tracked to the Learning Record Store, or within an app, or within a virtual reality experience. And it was by design when they set up the XAPI Learning Record Store that you don't have to go to a course catalog and log into an LMS first, because there's many different things like a virtual reality or an app where it's not convenient to start in the course catalog of an LMS. So it initiates the tracking from behind the scenes. Focused on tracking, as I said, and it can kind of standardize, customize reporting, because a lot of the learning management system history is, let's track what score you got. Let's track whether you passed or failed. Okay, we know what we need to know about you. Maybe we track which questions did you miss most often or were missed most often by learners. But the Learning Record Store is set up so that you could track anything. So for instance, if it were in a virtual reality and people violated a safety rule or did steps out of order, you could log those things and get a report of what happened in the virtual reality experience that's far beyond score and passed or failed. And one thing I would point out there is that because these are one of the newest kind of tools, you will often find that the reporting is not easy to do in this type of tool. And the best way to get dashboards or reports that you can read well are to connect the Learning Record Store to some of your tools like Power BI or Tableau or other analytics tools. And then fourth, we have the Learning Portal. And this is a focus on discovery, but it's a little different than the learning experience platform, and that often the learning portal is meant to organize specific topics. It could organize all learning, or could do something like organize sales training or organize leadership training, but it sometimes focuses on only a specific delivery method. Like here's a portal for mobile learning. And maybe the biggest distinction is it may or may not include tracking. So if you think if your portal is built on SharePoint, right, it could help you find all kinds of training, but it doesn't have any of the features built in, like a learning experience platform or a learning management system of tracking what you did. So you can lose something there if you make it easy for people to find training, but then you lose sight of what they've taken because you don't launch it in such a way that you could track it. Any questions on the differences between these systems?
You know, one of the things that we needed, given the 2/3 of our training was, was for people in the field, those 48 certification requirements. So the managers of those people, if they wanted to have somebody go into a tunnel with underwater, there are a number of certifications they had to have. And so we built into our system a lookup system so the manager could find out whether a particular employee had certification requirements met so they could do the work assignment for that employee. And that's pretty common out there in industry and in utilities.
Yes, we have some clients in energy utilities that need those type of qualifications before they're allowed to do work on lines where their LMS has been engineered to get the reports they need to say if they're qualified to work. And then we have within med tech industries spots where equipment is connected to the learning management system such that when the user logs into the system to use the equipment, if they're not trained, it simply won't let them start the procedure. So that type of thing, the interconnection between the training record is complete and you can do your work can be very important in some industries.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, next question. What e-learning authoring tools should we use? So sometimes people ask it exactly this way. Other times they'll just say, hey, should we use Storyline or Captivate? Or is there any reason we can't just use Rise for everything? And it's that same type of thing where in order to answer this question, we need to know more about what it is you're trying to do, because there's not an answer like a tool is good or not good. It would be like asking, hey, is a hammer good? Can I use a hammer for everything? You use a hammer for certain things. You use a screwdriver for certain things. Very likely you shouldn't use one authoring tool for everything you do. If you are, it means either you're doing a very limited set of things or you're using the wrong tool for the wrong job sometimes. So we've got another scenario here. What might go wrong in this case? And I'm going to just take us through to get us back on track for time. So the wrong tool for the job. In this scenario, the organization is developing most of its in-house training using Articulate Rise because it's fast and easy to use. Some senior leaders are asking for more advanced simulations, and the developers are doing their best to accomplish this through workarounds. So what might go wrong when the fast and easy to use tool is used to develop more advanced workarounds or to develop more advanced simulations? This workaround is going to cause a problem because Articulate Rise is the wrong tool for advanced simulations. It's great for easy training, but it's not right for advanced interactivity. And how might a learning technology strategy have helped in this case? So here the macro learning needs have expanded. We've gone beyond awareness to something that needs more practice. And if we had documentations about the pros and cons of the popular authoring tools, which would be a part of the strategy, it would make it more clear that Articulate Rise is the wrong tool to use. But there's a whole bunch of different things that you can think about as you think about what is the best tool to accomplish a particular thing. So one of the things that we focus on, and one of the ones I like the most, is the capability and complexity of the tool, because there's always a trade-off between what the tool can accomplish and how much skill you need to use it because it's complex. Other things are the type of content you're working on. You're going to use a different tool if you're trying to produce a video than if you're producing an e-learning. What LMS standards is the tool compatible with? It's no good for you to have a tool and it produces HTML output and you need output that's SCORM compliant, so it will work with your LMS, or some other combination where there's a mismatch. And then again, back to our technology infrastructure, the architecture, we need a tool that's compatible with what requirements we have in place because of our IT. There's interoperability between tools, so you might choose one tool because it pairs very well with another tool that you have and they work well together. And then there's license cost, but this one you have to be very careful with because sometimes people will think, all right, this tool costs $4.99 a year for my developer, and this one costs $14.99 a year for my developer, so I'm going for the $4.99 a year tool. But when you think about how much time it takes to develop e-learning, if you're talking about saving $1,000 in a year, you're easily going to eat that up if you have a tool that wastes a ton of people's time because the tool is harder to use. So you need to make sure that you're not robbing Peter to pay Paul if you are trying to save a small amount on an authoring tool license. All right, so on this point about the capability and complexity, I've divided it into 4 categories. As you go down from 1, 2, 3, 4, it's increasing capability, but also increasing complexity. So if you think about formatting tools, the right type of person who could use this is anyone who has the experience using things like Microsoft Office, right? A subject matter expert could use these tools. And in this case, you're really producing content without interactivity. Now, it's not to say that the subject matter expert has the right instructional design tools that they should be creating training, but they have the skill to put the media into the tool. So that's 2 different things. You're going to need an instructional designer if you want good training, but if you want to be able to put the content into the tool, anyone with the skills of a subject matter expert could do it. Next level up, level 2, is the authoring tool. And here, this would be a tool like Articulate Rise. An instructional designer is going to be able to get in and work in the tool. It's going to have low to medium interactivity level. So you're going to be able to create drag and drops and flashcards and matching and multiple choice, whatever kind of questions you want like that, right? And you're going to be able to present content in different ways. So you don't need someone who knows how to write code to produce this type of thing. So I would say Articulate Rise falls squarely in this area. And then if you take Articulate, Storyline, or Captivate, if you use the simpler functions of it, definitely it could fall into this category too. Next level up is level 3, which is scripting. And scripting belongs to the domain of someone who has the skills of a website developer. So here you might need to use JavaScript. If you are going to write JavaScript, you're going to be able to accomplish all sorts of things, but you're also going to spend more time because it's more complex. And what you'd find here is if you take an instructional designer and try to have them do scripting, it's not going to go very well. It's going to be ineffective because they can't do it. On the other hand, if you take something that the need only really needs medium interactivity without code, and then you go with one of these higher levels, like the website developer or the next level up, the computer programmer, certainly they have the skills to do the task, but it's going to be overkill. You're going to end up spending money on a higher role and probably more complex programming to do something that you could have done with an easier tool. So it's not really like you definitely want to go higher or lower on this tool. What you want to do is you want to align the role and the type of tool to the need that you have. That top level computer programmer likely has a degree in computer science. This would be a case maybe where they're using a gaming engine like Unity or Unreal to develop custom virtual reality stuff. Also, 3D simulation stuff that's interactive, if it's not virtual reality on a computer screen, could still require that level. Next way to look at it is, okay, what type of content are we developing? So certainly some tools align to a particular type of content. So if you're doing animations, you might want to do Beyond or VideoScribe, PowerPoint, or After Effects. And out of those different levels of skill still, So beyond could be done by an instructional designer. Adobe After Effects takes some training. Audio, you might use Adobe Audition or Audacity. Graphics, Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop are common tools, but lots of other choices. E-learning with simple or standard activity, Articulate Rise, Adobe Captivate, sometimes Storyline. If you keep it simpler, and then if you're going to go to more custom or complex, it might be HTML or Articulate Storyline. And by their HTML, I mean not the output is HTML, but you're developing directly in HTML and JavaScript. All right, I want to make sure I'm not going too fast. Questions, thoughts, comments?
I think the pace is good. It's up to you. Clockwise, like I said, we've all been here, so we'll hang with you as long as you'd like.
Okay.
So yeah, I say keep going.
All right. Don't feel obligated if this is not your cup of tea. I won't feel offended if you go, but I'm happy to have you. Okay, LMS standards. So I mentioned SCORM, the Shareable Content Object Reference Model, probably the most common way to do tracking to learning management systems right now from the third-party tools. AICC standard, Aviation Industry CBT Committee, is an older standard, was most common used before SCORM, and not very frequently used now. And then this XAPI is the newest one, and the one I mentioned, you don't have to start from a learning management system and more types of reporting, and it's becoming more and more common. The Experience API actually developed by the Department of Defense, just like SCORM was, as the military needs to keep track of a lot of training of who's doing what. Main thing for us to keep in mind here is that we need to make sure that what we develop is compatible with what our learning management system can support. But if you think about it that way, almost all learning management systems can support SCORM and AICC. XAPI, not so much yet, but it's building and building more support. Also, if we think about how are we going to make sure that our tools are going to work for our organization as a whole, it would be these kind of things like, okay, a standard that it will run in a web browser or an app, if that's our requirement. It's compatible with our bandwidth requirements. So when we think about bandwidth requirements, primarily video is the biggest concern, then audio next, then graphics, then text because of the relative sizes. And so we think of things like pictures in terms of overall size, like an image can be no larger than 900 kilobytes because it's going to be too large to download. But when we think about video or audio, we have to think about not the overall size, but the size per second, because it is downloading while it's playing. So we can't exceed that size per second. And that's where it ties back to that video distribution can give us a variable size per second that fits. But we will find that for most of the organizations that we work with, it's fine to have something like 800 or 900 kilobits per second for video, and they can handle it. But we do hit cases like we had clients who deliver globally and they have to reach people in Asia or in South America where the device is going to be a phone by default, not a computer, and the bandwidth, because it's going to go through some kind of a VPN, is going to be much, much lower. And in some cases, it means, all right, video is not an option. It's just not going to work. We're going to need to switch to a slideshow of pictures instead. One requirement would be if you are aiming for phones that like Articulate Rise or the ADAPT framework, it supports responsive design. So instead of just shrinking as the screen gets smaller, it rearranges the content to make it fit. And then ensuring that we're avoiding any plugins or proprietary technology. So in the past, don't use Flash, don't use Java, but by and large, just don't use any proprietary technology because it's likely to be blocked. And if it's not blocked now, it may become blocked in the future. So sticking to the standards is better. All right, so next topic, leaving the authoring tools, moving to the question, how can we be efficient when developing courses? So several ways that you could do this, which are going to be fleshed out in the learning technology strategy. One of them is going to be templates. So you are going to want to use templates whenever the layout or the interactivity in something you're developing are similar. So you can have a template for multiple choice questions. You can have a template for course introductions. It's really, is this a layout that the layout that I'm using now, I'm going to use over and over again in other courses? Let's start from a template that we've built that matches our branding. It's going to improve consistency and it's going to improve development speed. Next is common content sequences or common content segments or sequences, whichever you want to call it. But this is instead of when the layout or the interactivity is similar, when the actual information is the same or similar. So maybe based on what your organization does, there's a certain thing we're going to include in this course. That segment belongs in a number of other courses also. If you have a small amount of that, you want to kind of just gather together those content segments and have them available. If your organization is somehow the type that has a ton of that, you may want to actually look at a content management system that lets that content be in multiple e-learning courses from one place instead of embedded into each, such that if you update that content segment, it updates in all places at once. And there are some tools that specialize in that type of thing. And then next is reusable media assets. And that's when you have audio or graphics or video that are the same, that you're going to use it in one course or another. And in that case, you may use a content management system that makes it easy to find those assets so that they could be embedded in, but it may not literally be embedding it once such that it goes in all of them, like the type I just mentioned. And then there's standards that can help you improve your efficiencies. So the standards could apply to many different sections. And what we want to do is connect it back to the same sections we had before, the infrastructure, architecture, and the development, distribution, and tracking. So for infrastructure architecture, we could set standards around the image file sizes and the bit rates that we talked about, and the device types and operating systems and browsers. And if you think about people might bring phones, right? It's a standard to say everyone will have an iPhone 14. It's also to say a standard to say it's bring your own device. People can bring whatever they want. Or a different kind of standard to say bring your own device, but it must at least meet these requirements. And it's a standard to say there is no standard. Anybody can bring anything they want. So you got to document it and work with it and meet it. The one where anybody can bring anything they want with no minimum standards, I think it isn't going to work. But most of the other ones you can work around as long as you know what's coming. For development standards, you want to have file and folder naming conventions so that if you're developing something now and another developer comes in later and the next one comes in later, they all know what it means when they start looking at the file structure, not just the Wild West. For formats for audio and video and graphics and storyboards, you want to have standards for what you use within your organization. For distribution, you're going to have standards around course and curriculum configuration standards. That's going to help improve things. And there could be other examples as well. And then for tracking, it's going to be having standard reports and rules about how you customize reports would also be a good one. All right, so got another scenario here, reinventing the wheel. So in this scenario, there's a vice president who's convinced that one of the problems at the organization is poor time management. She asked the development team whether the course should be developed using Captivate or Storyline because she isn't sure which is the better tool. They provide the pros and cons of the two tools and land on Storyline. What might go wrong, or what might have gone wrong, or what might go wrong in this scenario?
In my opinion, I'm sorry, this Vance, in my opinion, the premise of the question may be wrong. So has the organization already made the decision that this type of training is a correction to poor time management? In my experience, the premise of the question is oftentimes the first problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is that having a course on time management might not improve time management. And I actually asked this question once, and my attendees said, first of all, if you're trying to have better time management, don't waste time taking more courses. So yeah, that could be one thing, is the time management wouldn't, taking a course would not help. If we did assume that taking a course would help, what else might be wrong?
Well, we really don't know the basis by which they decide the pros and cons. But, what is the criteria put forth to them to say it does this, it doesn't do that?
Yeah, that's right. It could be that neither story, like she came in saying it should be storyline or captivate, which one is better, and it might not be either. There's another issue too. So one thing, if we did reach the point where we thought training was going to help, and it may not, but if we reach that point, we should probably go see if there's any generic content instead of going to develop something from scratch. And if we need to do a little customization, we might want to go, okay, what tools could take existing content off the shelf on time management and make it easy for us to customize it for what we need for our organization. So lots of things wrong with this path where you jump to, this is the solution, let's go build it without really knowing. This is the tools that we could choose from without really knowing and understanding if we were going to build it, what's the best way to build it. All right, so I think I'm on my second to the last slide here. And what I'm going to show is a comprehensive reference model that we would use to kind of make sure that we don't miss anything when we're thinking about all the sections of the learning strategy that we talked about. So I don't want you to get caught up in really the details of complexity of joining it all together. I'm just going to kind of show a line at a time of it to show how it fits together. And it's really more important that it does fit together than all the details. So what we're doing here is we're kind of following the path from the infrastructure architecture through all the steps of developing and so on. So if we examine the tools that we have within the infrastructure architecture and document them, and then we move to the development tasks, the document and media and editing tools are going to be an input to the creation of e-learning. So things like Microsoft Word and PowerPoint and your Photoshop and Illustrator tools, those audio and graphic tools would be an input to content creation, where you might use e-learning authoring tools or assessment authoring tools like Question Mark or others, or specialized tools like we talked about before, AR and VR and games and simulations. So then we went from the infrastructure to development of training. That development of training really just becomes one input, this far left input of the learning content sources. But there could be learning content from lots of other sources, content provider libraries like Skillsoft and the video distribution systems. If you're in a regulated environment like medical devices or pharma, a document control system that has some read-in signs that you have to do. You would have your ILT and VILT web conferencing, and then lots of specialized platforms that might get used less frequently, but sometimes, like coaching and mentoring platforms, micro-learning platforms, engagement platforms, assessment platforms, file sharing and collaboration, on-the-job checklists, and gamification platforms. So that first row only fed into one of our sources. There's this whole row of other sources other than regular e-learning that might also be looking to land in a distribution system. Then we take what got developed or purchased and we are going to put it into a spot where content can be distributed and discovered. And that would be your LMS assignments and your LMS catalog of courses, a learning experience platform if you have one, a portal that could be used to distribute, maybe sales enablement tools that act as a portal, and manager and peer recommendations. So lots of places that might try to surface all this stuff that got developed. But on the left-hand side, you see that I have a feed in from the HCM system or HRIS system, so Human Capital Management or Human Resources Information System, which is hopefully feeding the skills that these learners need to learn. Because one of the biggest problems we see is that companies are trying to manage all of this stuff that gets created or bought, like filtering into all these systems and doing it without a clear picture of any documentation of what skills people need to learn. And so they're trying to do it by job role, or some cases person by person. Like Mark Bowers needs to take, and here's this list of 80 things assigned to Mark Bowers. And now what about the next person over, right? And trying to manage that individually instead of saying, people who need these skills automatically get these things. It's a much easier job to manage. Okay. And then once all the stuff gets distributed, it filters down into the tracking systems, which might be your database for your learning management system or your LRS. You're going to have certifications that come out, like what you were talking about, Erwin. And then analytics, maybe, where you're going to send stuff into a data warehouse for processing, send it to business intelligence tools, or you're going to make use of survey tools to figure out how all this stuff worked. So there's really too many things in this chart that I shouldn't have it as a slide, but I use this type of thing myself as I'm working through the strategy when I'm assessing an organization to say, in order to figure out where you have gaps within your strategy between your current and desired state, these are all the things that a company might currently have or not have and might desire in the future to have or not have. And I call it comprehensive, but I'm sure if I move to another organization, there might be something missing, then I'll add it to this chart. But I view this as a great way to have a comprehensive view of what you need to think about for your learning strategy. So we will make available, Mark, the deck as a PDF so people can get this if they want it.
Perfect. Hey, I do have a thought there about that previous slide. You got that empty
Sure.
left-hand corner. Fill that up with how am I going to document all this stuff for the next Bubba who's got to know how these pieces work together.
Yeah, so ideally, when you are creating your learning strategy, it should be a working document that has, do we have or not have each one of these things? Do we need or not need each one of these things? And you want to make that a living document that as time goes by, when you get a new system or lose a system or decide not to renew a contract, you keep that up to date, because if the next person comes in and this is not documented anywhere, that's why you need to do a learning strategy, because nobody knows and you got to talk to 50 people to figure it out. So yeah, that's a great point.
Exactly. So I want to take okay, I'm sorry, you had your last slide. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about the value that you're getting out of this strategy, right? So if we go through and do a learning strategy, we're going to get improved training solutions that follow the consistent standards, ensure they're going to work well with the infrastructure. That should help reduce learner frustration because learning actually works. And if you've done the instructional design right, hopefully it teaches them something. And if you've done the performance consulting right, hopefully it was training that was needed. And then, again, by having this strategy, you're going to probably be able to save money by eliminating those insufficiencies and inefficiencies that we talked about of too much overlap or missing tools that you really need, resulting in saving your organization, hopefully money, and getting better performance out of them, and changing it from where you're fighting your learning technology to you and your learning technology are working together. And from there, I'll open it up to questions. A lot of good questions throughout here, but take any other questions that you have. Got contact information there as well in case there's stuff that you think of later you want to ask about. I'm really excited because I got published in the ATD's TD magazine for this month. So if you happen to be a member, that QR code will take you there, or that's FWD for forward, fwd.innovativelg.com/TD_mag_LTS. Will take you to be able to see that article. If you're not a member, though, it's going to make you sign up. So if you're not a member and you want to find out more, again, feel free to follow up with me after.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much, Matt. We'll do a quick run around. Any last questions with Matt before we let him escape to the rest of his life? Erwin.
I think there's a lot of good information that you just shared, especially the last slide. The failure points invariably are the procurement process doesn't match your needs. And another failure point that I've seen over and over is the vendor product that you buy isn't the vendor product that they deliver. And so you need to be very wary and look elsewhere, look for people that are users of the system that you're procuring to see if it meets, if that system is being used in a way that matches what you need, because you can't count on all the vendors. And the procurement process failure is the decision makers in the procurement process may not be sophisticated about the learning organization. And they're making their decisions based on the show and tell that different vendors come in and do. So those are things to be very wary of.
Yeah, you will find sometimes IT or HR makes a decision, hey, this company that we already get our HRIS system from, or our talent management system, also has a learning management system. The only thing that makes sense is to go ahead and add it because it's from the same vendor, and that often does not end well.
Anybody else?
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you for hosting this with us tonight. I appreciate it. A lot of what you said, when you're in the instructional design and you're developing the training, you think that a lot of that would be common sense, but it's amazing how many people do not follow such a strategy. So thank you very much for sharing.
Oh, thank you.
I think your next topic could be, how do you integrate AI developed content into these systems that you've invested a lot of money in?
Yeah, thank you.
Very good. Vance or Nadia?
I just want to express my thanks in presenting this. As an ISD professional, I often find myself designing it first in the face-to-face classroom, more brick and mortar model, and then if the content actually results in learning, testing very dipping my toe in rather reluctantly sometimes to transfer that into the most available e-learning strategy that our organization provides. And what is disappointing to me in that regard is that any e-learning strategy has an almost precipitous drop in actual learning, particularly as it relates to skill-based versus knowledge-based learning. So there's such a precipitous drop in learning that oftentimes we end up reverting back to face-to-face anyway. And then it's 5-10 years down the road when a vendor comes by and says, oh, well, let's try this, which doesn't match with our evaluation of learning strategies at all. And it ends up being a cheaper choice at that point because it removes the requirement of having a instructor in the front of the classroom, and they don't have to capture the time that the students are investing. So, I mean, they think it's almost free time because it's e-learning vice classroom learning. So
Yeah,
that's some of the problems that I run into.
absolutely. Just like one tool isn't right for everything and a hammer isn't right for everything, e-learning is definitely not right for everything. And if you need that feedback that you get from the classroom, it's not right. So either it may be that e-learning doesn't make sense at all, or it might be in some cases use e-learning to teach some of the concepts that are just knowledge stuff so that you when you come to the class you can focus on the stuff that needs skill and you don't have to waste time on the stuff that you could have learned in an e-learning because it's simpler. But you could be very right. There could be cases where with what you're teaching e-learning just isn't right.
Yeah. Again, very well presented. Thank you very much for the information.
All right.
Yes, thank you, Matt.
All right. Well,
Thank you all.
Thanks everybody for attending. Thank you again, Matt. As Matt said, HRSPI will distribute a PDF version of the slides, and as always, our recording will be posted to our YouTube channel. You and everybody else who registered will get a little more information or get the links to that stuff early next week. So again, thank you very much. We do not have a speaker lined up for February, so if you've got a burning issue you'd like to share, or you know somebody that should might be happy to share some insights on performance improvement, training, learning, development, leadership, cat juggling, we're open to entertain all comers. So appreciate any thoughts you might have on that. So with that, I'm going to stop recording and wish everyone a very good night. For those of you who are stuck in the path, bundle up, see if you find your shovel. Take care.
Thanks all.